Girl waves at Big Shaq every day. The day she doesn't, his gut tells him to check her home. In a small neighborhood on the outskirts of Dallas, Texas, life often followed the same familiar rhythms. People knew each other, greeted each other, and watched out for one another. And if you drove through this neighborhood often enough, you might have noticed a little girl named Mia standing by her window each morning. She would always wait for Big Shaq, Shaquille O'Neal, the retired NBA star who had recently moved to Texas and was now a beloved part of the community, to drive by on his way to the gym. Each day, Mia waved enthusiastically, and each day Shaq would smile and wave back, sometimes even honking the horn, just to make her smile wider. It had become part of his routine, something he looked forward to, a bright spot in his mornings before the day really got started. Shaq had taken a liking to Mia from the first time he'd seen her, her little face lighting up with excitement every time she saw his big truck rumbling down the street. He didn't know much about her, just that she was always there, looking happy, and that her wave never failed to make him feel good. It was such a simple thing, yet it reminded him of why he chose to live in a community like this, where people felt connected in small but meaningful ways. One Wednesday morning, as Shaq drove down the street in his Dallas neighborhood, something felt off. He glanced over at Mia's window, expecting to see her there, smiling and waving like she always did. But this time the window was empty, the curtains were drawn, and there was no little girl in sight. He tried to shake off the uneasy feeling that settled in his chest. Maybe she was just sick, or had an appointment. But as the day went on, he couldn't get the image of that empty window out of his mind. Something felt wrong, and the more he thought about it, the stronger the feeling became. At last, he found what he was looking for, a white industrial sign that marked the office of the control office. By the time he was on his way back home that evening, Shaq knew he had to check on her. He couldn't shake the feeling, and Texas weather had been unpredictable lately, making him worry even more. He drove to Mia's street in Dallas and parked his car in front of her house. The place looked quiet, too quiet. He walked up to the front door and knocked, waiting for someone to answer. There was no sound from inside, no footsteps approaching. He knocked again, louder this time, but still there was nothing. Shaq frowned, a knot of worry forming in his stomach. He walked around to the side of the house, peeking through the windows. But it was dark inside. He was about to head back to his car when he heard it. A faint sound, almost like a whimper. Shaq's heart skipped a beat. 5 years ago, he moved closer to the side door and tried the handle. To his surprise, it was unlocked. He pushed the door open, calling out softly, "Hello?" "It's Shaq," Gino said. His face flushed. "Jack Shabarius." He gave them the information. "Is anyone home?" She looked pale, her eyes half closed, her breathing shallow. Shaq's chest tightened in fear. He rushed to her side, gently lifting her into his arms. "Little girl. Hey, can you hear me?" he asked, his voice shaky. He drove as fast as he could to the nearest hospital in Dallas, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He kept glancing over at Mia, her head resting against the seat, her eyes closed. "Hang in there, kiddo," he whispered, his heart aching with worry. When they arrived at the hospital, nurses and doctors quickly took Mia from Shaq's arms, rushing her into the emergency room. Shaq stood there, feeling helpless, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what was wrong, but he knew one thing. If he hadn't followed his gut, if he hadn't checked on her, she might not have made it. He paced back and forth in the waiting room, his mind racing with worry, hoping and praying that Mia would be okay. Hours passed, and finally a doctor came out to speak with him. She gave him a small smile, her eyes tired but kind. "She's stable now," she said. "Her name is Mia, and she was severely dehydrated and malnourished. It's a good thing you brought her when you did. She was strong, but she'll need time to recover." "Can I see her?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The doctor nodded, leading him to Mia's room. Shaq stepped inside, his heart clenching at the sight of her lying in the hospital bed, an IV in her arm, her face still pale but looking a little better. He walked over to her bedside, pulling up a chair and sitting down. Mia opened her eyes slowly, her gaze focusing on him. A small smile tugged at her lips. "Big Shaq," she whispered, her voice weak. Shaq smiled, tears welling in his eyes. "Hey kiddo," he said softly, "you scared me, you know that?" "Of course," he said. "I'll always be here for you, Mia. You're not alone." Over the next few days, Shaq visited Mia every day. He brought her stuffed animals, books, and even some of her favorite snacks, once she was able to eat again. He stayed by her side, making sure she knew she was safe and that she had someone who cared about her. He also spoke with the doctors and social workers, wanting to understand what had happened and how he could help. It turned out that Mia's mother had been struggling with substance abuse, leaving Mia neglected and alone for long periods of time. Shaq's heart broke hearing this. He knew he couldn't just walk away. He had to do something to make sure Mia was taken care of, that she would never have to feel alone or scared again. With the help of social services, Shaq was able to connect Mia with a foster family in Texas, a loving couple who had experience caring for children in need. He made sure they were good people, the kind who love and cherish Mia the way she deserved. And even after she moved in with them, Shaq stayed in her life. He visited her regularly, took her out for ice cream, brought her to his basketball games, and made sure she always knew she was loved. She scarcely ever left home on her own. Mia flourished in her new home. She started to smile again, her laughter filling the air whenever Shaq came to visit. She began to do well in school, made friends, and even joined a local basketball team in Dallas, inspired, of course, by her favorite big friend. And every time Shaq saw her, his heart swelled with pride. He knew that following his gut that day had been the best decision he'd ever made. The story of Big Shaq and Mia teaches us about the power of intuition and the importance of acting on our gut feelings. It also shows how small, seemingly routine actions, like waving to someone every day, can form meaningful connections and ultimately change lives. Shaq's decision to check on Mia when something didn't feel right made all the difference in the world for that little girl, proving that compassion and courage can lead to profound impacts. Sometimes it's the simple gestures and the choice to care that can mean everything to someone in need. This story also highlights the significance of community and how being present in each other's lives, even in small ways, can create a bond strong enough to save someone. Whether it's a wave, a smile, or a kind word, those gestures can provide comfort and assurance, especially to those who may feel invisible or alone. Shaq's genuine concern and willingness to step in when no one else did serve as a reminder that we all have the capacity to be heroes in someone else's story. What do you think? Have you ever had a moment where your intuition told you something was wrong and you acted on it? We'd love to hear your experiences. Share them in the comments below and let us know how even small actions have made a big difference in your life or someone else's.